The Army has seen enough from 6 Pathfinders, using digital engineering tools and techniques that it's ready to go all in. A new memo from Gabe Camarillo, the undersecretary of the Army, sets the stage for broader adoption of digital engineering capabilities and practices. Federal News Network's executive editor Jason Miller joins me with the latest. And Jason, let's start with some basics. Digital engineering, and why is the Army all in and excited about it?
It's not a term we hear a lot about these days, but I think, Tom, we're going to hear a lot more about it. And simply put, digital engineering relies on data, advanced technologies such as simulation and modeling, traditional systems engineering practices to create digital models instead of the more traditional paper-based models. These virtual representations can change over time as the needs of the organization or even as the technology changes. And of course, Tom, it makes it easier for developers to understand a host of challenges ranging from cost to sustainment to how the system can work together within other systems. You mentioned Gabe Camarillo, the Undersecretary of the Army. He signed out that memo on Tuesday. He spoke about it the other day at the FCA Nova Enterprise IT Day.
It enables our ability to identify requirements trade-offs earlier in the process, to plan more adequately for sustainment of both hardware and software. It identifies cost drivers in the operation of weapon systems in the future, and it helps us to identify and mitigate technical risks through more robust modeling and simulation and the development of digital twins.
Now, Tom, this is not a new concept for DoD. DoD has had a digital engineering strategy since 2018. That strategy outlines 5 elements needed for digital engineering ecosystems, including like formalizing the development and use of models, providing an authoritative source of truth, incorporating technical innovation, establishing and supporting infrastructure and environment, and transforming the culture and workforce to adopt and support digital engineering. So in many ways, this Army policy is just building on that work done by DoD as well as other services over the last few years.
And therefore, the Army is calling for more of this. What are they actually asking for in this new policy from Camarillo?
The policy outlines 4 levels of effort that the Army will initially apply digital engineering around. The first is to create digital engineering focus areas, or what he calls centers of gravity, to be able to accelerate the adoption of DE tools.
There's going to be 3 commodity areas that we're going to look at first. The first is in the ground vehicle domain. Second is aviation. And the third is sensors. And the reason why we're taking this approach on this first LOE is we recognize that, the way DE is employed, it's varied based on the commodity area that you're talking about. It's very mature in a lot of these domains that I just described. And so we are looking to benefit from that utilization of digital engineering tools to be able to help establish the right processes in the Army, the right training, and really how do we adapt our institutional approach to be able to accommodate more digital engineering.
Camarillo says the second line of efforts around shaping interoperability and standards for implementation. He says the Army just doesn't want to pick up 1 or 2 different tools, but really take this commodity-focused approach. He says that way they can understand the standards around interoperability or maybe cybersecurity as an example and be more consumers of the market versus dependent on one tool or a set of tools.
Third line of effort is we're going to designate a handful of Pathfinder programs. And these programs range the life cycle of a weapon system from early design, like I mentioned with XM30, all the way to some programs that are well under sustainment as legacy programs to be able to identify how we can utilize them. And the goal here is to just think about it. How do you change our processes? So if you're doing a preliminary design review of a system in development, or if you're doing the need to identify cost driving parts for a legacy system, how do you get after that? By looking at some of these Pathfinder programs.
And the fourth line of effort, of course, is workforce. You need a trained set of experts to make this all work well. Tom, we can never talk enough about the workforce.
Sure. And, of course, digital engineering, which is a workforce issue also, it's not brand new. It's been around a while. What's the Army's timing? Why now for this new policy?
In many ways, they're trying to play catch-up. The automotive, aircraft industries have been doing this in the private sector for a long time. The Army is racing to do more to catch up with the private sector. And he says the policy really is about accelerating the adoption of the tools. Camarillo says the Army's 6 Pathfinders done over the last few years have really shown the potential and value of digital engineering.
So, for example, the XM30 Bradley IFV replacement program is actually receiving digital engineering artifacts as part of its development of that new combat platform. Similarly, our future vertical lift efforts in Huntsville and the development of our FLRAA platform are already incorporating digital designs and digital engineering into those major programs. So it's got a toehold, if you will, in the Army in those areas. Sensors would be the third. We want to expand on it and really accelerate some of the efforts in those 3 areas. And then the goal is we would expand it out.
The one area where the Army probably does need to play more catch-up than in others is in that sensor area. None of the pathfinders that they've outlined in the policy really were in that sector. Now, the policy detailed the challenges, the opportunities to build out sensors that can send data to multiple platforms in a system of systems approach.
And we mentioned workforce, and of course, industry is always a part of this in some manner. And what are they doing to prepare the workforce and their supplier base here?
Tom, I think you're absolutely right that any new policy, any new initiative, if you don't get the workforce on board, if they're not well trained, it's not really going to go too well. Now, the good news, of course, Tom, this is not a brand new concept as we've been talking about, but at the same time, as you expand, you need more people who understand digital engineering. So the Army has them in pockets, so they have to find those champions, those experts, and really start to spread that knowledge. Now, I caught up with Camarillo after he spoke Tuesday at the FCA Enterprise IT Day to ask him about that workforce challenge.
In addition to training that we're going to bring into the Army, I think we're also looking to find opportunities to do talent exchanges with industry, particularly vendors who are very adept at utilizing and institutionalizing digital engineering in their processes, see if we can learn directly from them, and also have some of our professionals work at those companies and vendors for training opportunities so that they can be inculcated in best practices and bring them back to the Army.
Maybe a little bit outside your swim lane, but I'll give it a try. Bill Dunlap spoke before you. I'm not sure if you heard any of his speech, but anyways, he mentioned the cyber IT exchange. Is there a similar exchange program that you guys have or are looking at that would bring in folks and let folks from the Army go out to industry? Is there anything that already is like that? Or
We do. We have pretty robust training with industry programs and private party talent exchanges. We're looking to expand those to include some of these digital engineering companies that have pretty robust practices in place.
Now, the policy also calls on the Army to develop what they call recipes, probably playbooks, and another way to say it, guidelines, as well as creating standard contract language and contract data requirements lists to ensure that there's consistency in the products that the vendors are delivering to the Army. So, Tom, this is just getting started. A lot more to come on this, but I think this is a big step for the Army, and I think this is a sign of things to come.
Federal News Network's Jason Miller, thanks so much.
Always a pleasure.
And be sure to check out his story at federalnewsnetwork.com.